The Earl of Ravensford had never been a man easily shaken. In all of Berkshire there was no figure more composed, more elegantly distant, more flawlessly in command of every room he entered. His name, Adrian Hawthorne, carried the weight of 5 generations of impeccable British lineage, an estate that stretched beyond what the eye could measure, and a reputation as cold and unyielding as the stone corridors of Ravensford Manor itself. He wore his pride like armor, polished to a quiet glimmer, and rarely removed for anyone. He had married for duty. Everyone knew it. The engagement had been arranged with the precision of 2 families seeking an advantageous alliance. No romantic declarations, no promises whispered under the moon, no stolen glances behind candlelit curtains. Simply an agreement signed between fathers and a ceremony sealed beneath the vaulted ceiling of St. Aldwyn's Chapel. His bride, Lady Eleanor Whitcomb, had entered the union with a serenity that puzzled him from the first day. She behaved with a grace so soft, so impossibly patient, that it unsettled his carefully arranged order more than he allowed himself to admit. Eleanor was not the type of woman one embroidered in gossip. She was not the dazzling, flirtatious beauty of the London season, nor the bold conversationalist who commanded salons. Instead, she possessed a quiet presence, gentle eyes the color of fading violets, a voice almost too soft to capture unless one leaned closer, and a kindness that felt foreign in the grand echoing halls of the aristocracy. She moved through Ravensford Manor as though wrapped in her own fragile universe, touching nothing, disrupting nothing, merely existing like a pale ghost drifting through obligations. And yet, every time Adrian passed her in the corridors, her head slightly bowed, her hands neatly clasped, something inside him tightened. He refused to name that feeling. He refused to acknowledge that he observed her more closely than he ever intended to. On the night everything began to shift. The manor glowed with the warmth of a winter gathering. Candles shimmered from every candelabrum, servants moved in a silent, orchestrated dance, and the scent of mulled wine drifted through the vast chambers. It was only their 3rd formal event as husband and wife, and though they fulfilled their public roles impeccably, an invisible distance stretched between them like a taut thread, too fragile to break, yet too present to ignore. Adrian stood near the hearth, half listening to the Earl of Westmoreland recount some political ordeal. His gaze, however, betrayed him. It wandered, uninvited, toward the far end of the ballroom, where Eleanor stood near the window, partially draped in the pale silver light of the winter moon. Her gown, a delicate shade of lavender silk, hugged her slender form with breathtaking simplicity. She was speaking softly with an older matron, listening more than talking, her fingers lightly touching the embroidered glove. At her wrist in a manner that betrayed nervousness, something twisted unexpectedly in Adrian's chest. He lifted his glass to his lips, hiding the reaction behind an unbothered sip of burgundy. This should not matter, he reminded himself. She was his wife by contract, not sentiment. They had exchanged vows, not affection, and yet the image of her, standing so quietly, so inwardly, as though the entire room were too loud for her, would not release him. "Your countenance is unusually heavy this evening, Hawthorne," Westmoreland observed with a chuckle. "One would think marriage has finally become a burden." Adrian tightened his jaw. "Marriage has not altered my disposition." "Indeed." Westmoreland laughed again, oblivious to the subtle shift in the Earl's expression. "Most men soften when presented with a gentle wife." Adrian's eyes drifted once more to Eleanor. Gentle, yes, that she certainly was. But there was something else, something he had chosen not to see, a quiet sadness beneath the composure, a loneliness she never voiced, a quiet plea buried behind her docility. He dismissed the thought sharply. He had neither the time nor the inclination to decipher the unexpressed emotions of a woman he barely knew, yet his body betrayed him again. Without thinking, he excused himself from Westmoreland and crossed the polished floor toward his wife. As he approached, she sensed him, her posture straightening almost imperceptibly, like a bird poised to take flight. "Eleanor," he greeted, his voice low, composed, but touched with something he hoped she would not detect. She dipped her head in a graceful nod. "My lord." Her formality still jarred him. She spoke to him as though he were a distant figure, unreachable, untouchable, a towering presence to which she owed politeness but not connection. That should have suited him. Distance had been the foundation of their marriage, but standing before her now, he felt a faint, inexplicable disappointment. "You look unwell," he found himself saying, though she looked nothing of the sort. "Is the room too warm?" "No," she replied, her eyes lifting just enough to meet his. "It is simply a great many people. I confess I am not accustomed to being observed." He resisted the urge to soften his stance. "You are the Countess of Ravensford. Being observed is now an inevitability." Her lips parted gently, as though she wished to respond further, but she hesitated, swallowing whatever words dared rise. "Of course, my lord." Again with the formality, again with the retreat. Adrian exhaled the faintest sigh, unheard beneath the music swelling from the orchestra. "Would you care for a walk on the terrace?" he asked, surprising even himself. "The air is cooler there." She blinked softly, as though the invitation had caught her unprepared. "If that would please you." "I asked if it would please you," he corrected quietly. For a moment, something flickered in her violet eyes. Surprise, confusion, and perhaps a faint longing he could not quite grasp. "Yes," she whispered. "It would." He offered his arm, and she took it with a feather-light touch, as though afraid she might weigh him down. They stepped through the tall French doors into the cold, crisp air of the winter night. Snow dusted the railing, and the gardens glimmered beneath the moonlight like a world suspended in crystal. For the first time, they were alone without the watchful gaze of society. The silence between them was both comfort and burden. "You seem quieter than usual," Adrian said slowly. Eleanor brushed a stray curl behind her ear, her breath forming a pale cloud in the air. "I am not certain what I ought to say to you." He paused. "You may say anything." She shook her head lightly. "That is not true." The honesty struck him. Soft, gentle, but deeper than he expected. He studied her profile, the delicate curve of her cheek, the way her lashes quivered as though she lived in the threshold between fear and reluctance. He had never taken the time to truly look at her. Not like this. Not with the intention of understanding. "Eleanor," he began, choosing his words with unusual care, "I am aware that our marriage was not formed upon affection. No marriages of our rank are," she replied softly. "I did not expect more than what duty required." Her tone never held accusation, only truth. "And yet," she added after a breath, "sometimes I wonder if I have disappointed you in ways I cannot see." His chest tightened again, this time sharper. "You have not disappointed me," he said. "You would tell me if I had?" He hesitated, not because he lacked an answer, but because he had never been asked a question that exposed him so fully. He was a man carved from restraint, built upon silence. But she looked at him now with a question that reached places he had long sealed away. Finally, he murmured, "I would not have taken you for someone who doubts herself." She looked down. "We all doubt something, my lord. And what is it?" "You doubt?" "My place beside you." There it was, quiet, unguarded, painfully honest. Adrian felt something fracture, a small, nearly imperceptible crack in the armor he had spent his life perfecting. He opened his mouth to speak, to say something, anything that might ease the loneliness woven through her words. But at that exact moment, the doors behind them opened, and a young footman stepped out, bowing hurriedly. "My lord, your presence is requested inside. Lord Pembroke insists upon speaking with you." Adrian's jaw clenched. Timing, it seemed, was never on his side. He turned to Eleanor, his expression uncharacteristically conflicted. "Will you be all right here?" "Yes," she said, stepping back, withdrawing into that quiet world of hers once more. "Of course." He lingered, just for a heartbeat, longer than he should have. Long enough for her to notice, long enough for confusion to flicker in her gaze. Then he left her. He walked back into the ballroom, performing his duties, his obligations, his role. But throughout the night, and long after the guests had departed, the image of his wife remained with him, standing alone on the terrace, her breath curling in the cold air, her eyes carrying the sorrow of a woman who felt unseen. He retired late, but his sleep was restless. He dreamed of lavender silk, of violet eyes filled with unspoken fears, of a fragile voice whispering doubts he did not know how to silence. By morning, something in him had silently shifted. And by the end of the week, before he even understood the tremor within his own heart, Eleanor was gone, without a word, without a note, without explanation. And the Earl, the man who prided himself on feeling nothing, stood in the empty corridor outside her chambers, and felt something break so deeply he could not breathe. The disappearance of Lady Eleanor Whitcomb, Countess of Ravensford, spread through the manor like a silent storm, one that rattled the very bones of its ancient foundation. Servants whispered in corners, their glances darting nervously to doors left ajar. Horses were saddled before dawn, riders dispatched to the nearest villages, posting houses and coaching inns. And through it all, the Earl of Ravensford moved like a man, trapped inside a world he no longer recognized. Adrian Hawthorne had never known panic. It had been an emotion that belonged to lesser men, men who lacked discipline, men who faltered, men who collapsed under strain. He had been raised not to fear. He had been sculpted from childhood into something unshakable. But as he stood in Eleanor's empty chamber, the faint scent of lavender fading from her pillow, her wardrobe half open and devoid of her gowns, something foreign and merciless gripped him. Fear. Raw, uninvited, humiliating fear. He tried to contain it, but it coiled tightly around his ribs, making it difficult to breathe. The room itself felt different, colder, as though some essential warmth had been lifted from it. Eleanor's presence, so quiet he had barely acknowledged it, was now more painfully obvious in its absence than it had ever been in life. "Nothing?" he asked the head footman, his voice a controlled thread of calm. "No, my lord. None of the staff saw her leave." "And the gates?" "Closed all night. No one passed through, my lord." Adrian turned away, his jaw clenched so tightly the muscle twitched. Someone must have seen her. She could not have simply vanished. Yet she had. Without noise, without trace, without a single explanation left behind. He expected anger to rise within him, expected indignation, pride, fury at the insult of being abandoned, but none of those came. Instead, he felt something softer, more dangerous, a sharp, hollow ache that grew with every breath. Memories stirred, memories he had ignored, memories that now returned with aching clarity. The way she had looked at him on the terrace, her voice trembling as she confessed her doubts, the fleeting emotion in her eyes when he asked if the walk pleased her, the hope so fragile, so brief, that had glimmered before she hid it again. He had seen it, he had ignored it, and now she was gone. He found himself seated at his father's old desk, fingers pressed to his temples. His father, stern, ruthless, terrible in his expectations, would have scoffed at such disarray. A Hawthorne does not chase after anything, the old Earl had said more times than Adrian could count. Not affection, not approval, not love. We are born to be sought, not to seek. And perhaps Adrian had believed him. Perhaps that belief had carved him into the man he now was, distant, disciplined, unreachable. A man who married for duty, because sentiment had no place in the future of Ravensford's legacy. A man who stayed silent when Eleanor spoke from her heart, because vulnerability was a language he had never learned. But as he sat alone, staring at the door she had walked through for the last time, he realized with startling force that he had been wrong. Utterly wrong. Because for the first time in his life, Adrian Hawthorne wanted desperately, achingly to seek someone, and she was nowhere to be found. For the next hours, he interviewed every servant, questioned every stable boy, inspected the grounds himself, and dispatched additional riders across the county. He spoke little, but the tension around him was palpable. Even the staff, accustomed to his stoic composure, stepped lightly in his presence. By late afternoon, he retreated to the estate's private study. The fire had burned low, the room dim and heavy with the scent of aging parchment and leather. He walked to the window that overlooked the frozen lake, hands clasped behind his back, posture straight and rigid. He expected answers to rise from the silence. They did not. Instead, something else surfaced, something buried deep within him. A memory he despised, a wound he had pretended no longer existed. The image of his mother, pale and feverish on her deathbed, whispering his name with trembling lips. He had been 13, frightened, helpless, watching as she slipped away, while his father stood unmoved at the foot of the bed. "Do not become like him," she had whispered with the last of her strength, her fingers barely grazing his cheek. "Promise me you will not hide from your heart." He had made the promise. And then, in an act of self-preservation, he had broken it. After her death, emotion had become his enemy. Vulnerability had become a threat. His father had cultivated pride like a weapon, and Adrian had inherited it as a shield. It was safer not to feel, safer not to need, safer not to want. But then Eleanor had walked into his life, not loudly, not boldly, but quietly, like a soft morning light creeping into a darkened room. She had unsettled him with her gentleness, her sincerity, her silent endurance. And now she had vanished, leaving behind an anguish he had no idea how to contain. A knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. "My lord," came the voice of Mr. Taylor, his most trusted steward. "I have something you should see." Adrian turned. "Show me." Taylor stepped forward, presenting a small white envelope, unmarked, sealed in haste. Adrian took it, recognizing the delicate handwriting at once. Eleanor's script. His heart dropped. He opened it carefully, feeling an inexplicable tremor in his fingers. The letter was short, only a few lines, written with rushed strokes. "My lord, forgive what must seem abrupt. I cannot remain where I do. Not belong. Please do not search for me. I shall not trouble your life further. E." The final initial was small, almost hesitant, as though she struggled even to sign her own name. Adrian read the letter twice, then a third time. The words blurred at the edges, not with tears. He had not cried since childhood, but with something heavy pressing against his composure, cracking it from within. "Taylor," he said quietly. "Who delivered this?" "It was found in the east corridor, my lord. On the table, near the gallery door." "Found," Adrian repeated, his voice turning colder. "Not given." Taylor hesitated. "Yes, my lord." "So she did not leave it for me directly?" "No, my lord." Adrian folded the note with methodical care, though his pulse thundered wildly beneath the calm surface. The fact that she had not left it on his desk, not placed it in his hand, not even slipped it beneath his door, struck him harder than he expected. She had not believed he would care enough to look. He dismissed Taylor with a nod, then sank into the nearest chair, elbows resting on his knees. He stared at the fire, his expression unreadable. On the outside, he appeared composed. Inside, something stormed violently. He whispered, "Not be long." The words scraped his throat. He rose abruptly, pacing before the hearth, as if motion might silence the torment. But it did not. The letter's message haunted him with brutal clarity. She had not left him out of defiance. She had left out of despair. He remembered her voice on the terrace. "I wonder if I have disappointed you in ways I cannot see." He had not answered. Not truly. Not in the way she needed. And now she was gone. For the first time in years, he felt the full weight of helplessness, a feeling he had sworn never to allow again. His father's voice rose from memory. "Do not chase. Do not bend. Do not show emotion. It is beneath a hawthorn." Adrian closed his eyes and exhaled a breath that trembled ever so slightly. His father was dead. The legacy remained. But for the first time, Adrian wondered if the legacy had been a prison he no longer wished to inhabit. He opened his eyes with a clarity that steadied him. He would search for Eleanor, not out of obligation, not out of duty, but because something inside him, something he had buried for far too long, demanded that he find her. By nightfall, he had saddled his own horse, eschewing servants, ignoring Taylor's concern, and left Ravensford Manor under a sky heavy with winter clouds. He rode through the cold, through the frost, through the silence of the fields where the moon cast pale shadows on the snow. He searched the village first, questioning innkeepers, merchants, even the old widow who sold bread at the market corner. No one had seen a young countess traveling alone. He moved on to the next town, scanning every coaching station, interrogating stable hands, scrutinizing every carriage that passed. Hours turned into night, night into dawn. Still nothing. By the time he returned to the manor, exhausted and covered in frost, he had not found a single trace of her, not even a rumor. It was as though she had been swallowed by the night. He stood in the entrance hall, breathing heavily, his cloak coated in snow. The servants watched in silent apprehension. They had never seen him like this. Hair disheveled, eyes dark with sleeplessness, pride stripped bare. "Prepare everything," he ordered. "I leave for London within the hour." London, the city large enough to hide. 1,000 vanished brides, but he would find her. He had to. Because the alternative, accepting a life where she no longer existed in his orbit, felt unbearably hollow. He ascended the stairs slowly, each step echoing through the emptiness of Ravensford Manor. He paused outside her door once more. The room stared back at him with all its absence. He rested his hand on the doorframe, his voice barely audible. "Eleanor, what have I done?" He stood there, unmoving, endlessly trapped in the silence. She left behind, and as dawn crept through the windows, Adrian Hawthorne, Earl of Ravensford, the man of iron, the aristocrat who had never feared anything, felt the first deep, undeniable terror that he might have lost the only person who had ever truly mattered. A terror born not of pride, but of the old wound he had spent his life pretending did not exist. London swallowed him whole. Its winter fog clung to the stone buildings like sorrow given form, drifting through alleyways, curling beneath carriage wheels, veiling the city in a restless grey. Adrian Hawthorne, Earl of Ravensford, rode along the narrow streets with a tension that had not left him in days. His horse's hooves rang sharply against the cobblestones, echoing through the early morning hush, as though announcing the arrival of a man whose composure had begun to fracture. He had searched every coaching station along the main road, interrogated every driver, questioned every innkeeper, spoken even to beggars and street vendors who rarely dared approach nobility. Yet no one had seen a young woman traveling alone, cloaked in lavender wool, carrying little more than a small traveling bag. It made no sense. Eleanor was not reckless. She was not spontaneous. She was not the type to disappear into a city as vast and unforgiving as London without some trace of her passing. And yet she had. The deeper Adrian ventured into the capital, the more acutely aware he became of the chaos beneath its polished veneer. Carriages jostled for passage, chimney smoke clouded the air, and every face among the crowd seemed burdened by invisible troubles. He forced himself to believe she could not have vanished within this labyrinth unless someone had helped her. That thought tightened every muscle in his body. He had left Ravensford Manor with one conviction: he would find Eleanor. But with each hour that passed, another conviction took shape, growing quietly, stealthily. Someone had taken her from him, perhaps not by force, perhaps not physically, but emotionally. The possibility dug into him with cruel persistence. He stopped first at Charing Cross Station, questioning anyone who might have seen her. Nothing. He visited 2 small inns near Covent Garden, hoping she might have sought modest lodging away from the fashionable districts. Again, nothing. He moved through the city's arteries, exhausting every lead, driven by an instinct he barely understood. By the time he reached King's Row, the winter sun had faded. Into a cold steel blue evening, he dismounted and approached a small tea shop where he knew a maid from his late mother's circle often worked. If anyone might have seen Eleanor, or heard whispers of her, perhaps it would be someone who had once lived within the shadow of the aristocracy, but now observed it from its periphery. Inside, warmth and the smell of fresh bread greeted him. The shopkeeper hurried to assist him, bowing as he recognized the hawthorn crest on Adrian's coat. "My lord, what an unexpected honor." "I seek a woman," Adrian said without preamble, his voice controlled but sharp. "Lady Eleanor Hawthorne. She is missing." The shopkeeper blinked rapidly, stammering, No, my lord. I have seen no ladies of rank, I assure you." Adrian's jaw tightened. He left a coin on the counter, nor for information but for silence, and stepped back outside. The moment he reached the street, he saw the first shadow of jealousy fully form. A carriage had stopped across the road. The crest belonged to Viscount Ashford, a name that sent a cold ripple through him. He and Ashford had studied together at Cambridge, though studied was a generous term for a rivalry built upon subtle power, unspoken challenges, and tensions rarely voiced. Ashford had always been charming, opportunistic, fond of stirring envy in others even when he did not desire the prize himself. Women adored him, and men tolerated him through gritted teeth. He was everything Adrian was not: open, expressive, seductive. Qualities Adrian despised but secretly feared, because he knew how easily such a man could capture the attention of someone as gentle as Eleanor. And now Ashford was in London. At the same time, Eleanor had vanished. Adrian's breath chilled. His fingers curled unconsciously around the pommel of his glove. Through the carriage window, the Viscount stepped out, adjusting his coat with an infuriating ease. He appeared entirely unbothered by the cold, offering a flirtatious smile to two passing ladies. Adrian watched him closely, fighting the urge to confront him then and there. If Eleanor had sought refuge, if she had confided in someone, if she had turned to a man who could offer her the comfort Adrian had failed to give. A slow, burning ache pulsed beneath Adrian's ribs. He knew nothing at all, but the mere possibility ignited something dark inside him. He crossed the street in measured steps. Ashford. The Viscount turned, his smile bright and unrestrained. Ravensford, what a surprise. I had not expected you in London so early in the season. Have you seen her? Ashford raised an eyebrow. Seen whom? My wife. The Viscount's expression shifted, subtly, almost too subtly. Not fear, not guilt. Something else. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps shock, perhaps well-hidden satisfaction. I was not aware Lady Eleanor was in London, he said, placing an elegant glove over his heart in false sincerity. But if she is, I assure you, she has not called upon me. The answer did nothing to ease Adrian's suspicions. Why are you here? Adrian demanded. I have business, Ashford replied easily. Parliament, investments, invitations. Surely you have heard. Adrian did not move. Ashford smiled faintly. Why do you ask? Surely the Countess has not run from Ravensford Manor. The question was seemingly innocent, yet it sliced through Adrian like a blade dipped in ice. He said nothing. Silence, he knew, was as damning as any confession. Ashford's smile widened. Not enough to be crude, just enough to provoke. My dear Ravensford, did you drive her away? Adrian's entire body stiffened. His voice emerged colder than a winter wind. Do not speak of my marriage. Then do not assume you are the only man she might seek. It took every bit of Adrian's control not to seize him by the collar. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice low and lethal. If you cross my path again, I advise you tread carefully. Ashford bowed lightly, amused. As you wish. Adrian turned away before he could do something irreversible. But the damage was done. The seed, jealous, corrosive, had been planted, and it grew quickly, twisting through his thoughts like dark vines wrapping around every breath he drew. He returned to his rented townhouse on the Strand. The interior was quiet, dimly lit, unwelcoming. A fire burned in the grate, throwing flickering gold onto the walls. Adrian removed his gloves with stiff motions. He sat at the edge of the long mahogany table, staring at the bare place by the window, where he imagined Eleanor might have stood, looking out at the bustling streets below. He imagined her shivering at the cold, pulling her lavender cloak tighter. He imagined her lips trembling, not from the winter air, but from the shock of leaving everything she had ever known. He imagined her turning to someone, perhaps someone who spoke gently, kindly, reassuringly, someone unlike him, and that thought unraveled him. He rose abruptly, pacing, the weight of his emotions pressing against the shell he had worn his entire life. Pride had kept him silent. Pride had kept him distant. Pride had built a wall so high that Eleanor could not scale it, no matter how softly she knocked. He saw her again in memory, standing alone at the ball, framed in moonlight, whispering her doubts on the terrace, waiting for him to say something he had never learned how to say. He had failed her, and now someone else might be holding the pieces of her wounded heart. He stood at the fireplace, bracing himself against the mantel as though the stone could keep him from breaking. His breathing grew uneven, but he forced it back under control. He stared at the flames, allowing the jealousy to burn through him, purging the illusions he had held about himself. He had believed Eleanor too quiet to inspire attention, too gentle to draw interest. He had been a fool, because quiet women are not unnoticed. Gentle women are not unloved. And sadness, true sadness, always finds someone who wishes to comfort it. He closed his eyes, imagining Eleanor's face in the glow of another man's company, and felt a sharp, stabbing pain that reached deep into parts of him he had buried since childhood. It was then he understood something he had refused to admit even to himself. He did not merely regret losing her, he was afraid someone else would see her worth before he had ever told her she possessed it. His fists tightened. The jealousy was no longer abstract. It was a living thing, pounding in his veins. He would not lose her. Not to loneliness, not to despair, not to another man who could offer her the tenderness Adrian had denied her. He pulled on his coat again, the decision already made. He would continue searching tonight, tomorrow, for as long as it took. London was wide and Eleanor was quiet, but she was not invisible. Not to him, not anymore. He stopped only when a knock echoed through the townhouse. A messenger boy stood outside, shivering in the cold. "For Lord Ravensford," the boy said, handing him a small folded note. Adrian's heart thudded. He unfolded it. No signature, no greeting, just a single line written in hurried script. She was seen near the Winter Gardens, a place notorious for clandestine meetings, romantic or otherwise. The jealousy surged violently. He did not think. He simply moved. Within minutes, the Earl of Ravensford was back on horseback, riding into the fog-heavy night, the city blurring around him as the Winter Gardens drew near. And with every beat of his racing heart, one truth became brutally clear. He was no longer searching for a missing wife. He was hunting the fear, burning and merciless, that someone else might have reached her first. The Winter Gardens sat at the edge of London like a secret waiting to be whispered. Once a grand spectacle of exotic plants and glittering lanterns, it had fallen slightly from society's favor. Still elegant, still respectable, but dim enough at dusk to shelter private conversations, no, one wished observed. It was the type of place where guilty hearts walked slowly, and confessions clung to the cold glass panes like breath trapped behind frost. Adrian Hawthorne arrived before midnight. The lamps at the entrance flickered in the wind, illuminating the wrought iron gate with an eerie glow. The fog thickened here, drifting low across the gravel as though trying to conceal whatever truths might lie within. He handed his horse to the nearest groom with only a curt nod and stepped inside. Every part of him was wound tight, jaw locked, shoulders stiff, breath held in a state of cold, merciless anticipation. He expected to find her immediately, expected her cloak, her hair, her familiar stillness in the corner of his vision, expected answers. Instead, the empty expanse of the Winter Gardens greeted him with silence. Torchlight shimmered through the glass ceiling panels, casting long shadows that trembled with every gust of wind. The scent of damp earth and wilted roses filled the air. A fountain murmured at the center, the sound echoing through the vast structure like a soft lament. And then, voices, not hers, male voices, low, indistinct, but unmistakably near. Adrian froze, every muscle tightening instinctively. He moved closer past the archway of ivy to the long gallery where ferns trailed from hanging baskets and stone benches lined the walkway. The voices sharpened into clarity. Said she seemed frightened, quiet, but determined. Didn't give her name. She had the look of a lady, not one of the city girls. A jolt shot through him. Eleanor, it had to be. He stepped forward, his boots striking sharply against the stone. The two men, a gardener and a groundskeeper, jumped in surprise at the sight of him. Their faces paled when they recognized the Hawthorne insignia on his coat. "My lord," the gardener exclaimed, bowing clumsily. Adrian's voice emerged low and controlled. "You saw a woman here. Tell me everything." The younger man swallowed. Yes, my lord. A few hours ago. She came through the back gate, looked lost, if I may say so." "What was she wearing?" Adrian demanded. "A lavender cloak." His heartbeat hammered so violently, he felt it in his throat. "Did she speak to anyone?" "She asked for shelter," the man replied. "Said she couldn't return home. We tried to help, but before we knew it, she'd gone deeper into the gardens. We haven't seen her since." Adrian closed his eyes briefly, an involuntary tremor moving through his chest. She had been here, alone, frightened, and he had not been. When he opened his eyes again, something had changed. The exhaustion, the jealousy, the confusion. They sharpened into something colder, determination, resolve. "Show me where you saw her," he said. They led him through the dim corridors of foliage, pointing out the places where her footsteps had been faintly visible in the dew. But the trail ended near the orangery, where lantern light cast strange amber reflections against the glass walls. "She was here," the groundskeeper said. Standing right at that corner, looked like she'd been crying. The words struck Adrian with unexpected force. He moved toward the corner, resting his gloved hand on the cold stone ledge. He saw nothing. No handkerchief, no cloak thread, no sign left intentionally. But he felt her presence. The air itself seemed disturbed, as if it held the memory of her hesitation. He imagined her standing here, shivering, brushing tears away with the back of her hand. He imagined the moment she realized she had nowhere to go, and he imagined the crushing loneliness that must have driven her from him in the first place. His throat tightened. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Why did you run from me, Eleanor?" There was no answer, only silence. He turned sharply and paced through the gardens, searching every corridor, every bench, every shadowed alcove. His steps grew more frantic with each empty place he found. By the time he reached the far end of the gardens, his composure, usually so impenetrable, began to crack. He almost did not hear the footsteps approaching, not Eleanor's, Ashford's. The Viscount emerged from the fog with a mocking elegance, as though this midnight wander had been nothing more than an amusing whim. His coat was impeccably fitted, his expression unreadable, his smile faintly provocative. "Ravensford," he said, drawing closer. "You look rather pale. Surely the night hasn't defeated you?" Adrian stiffened. "What are you doing here?" "A stroll," Ashford replied lightly. "London grows tedious in winter, and the winter gardens offer a certain privacy." Adrian's temper flared instantly. "You followed her." Ashford raised an eyebrow. "Do you imagine every path leads to me? I assure you, Ravensford, I have better things to do than chase your wife." The implication that Eleanor might have sought him instead sent a surge of fury through Adrian so swift he nearly lost control. "Do not speak of her," Adrian warned, his voice low. "Oh, but I must," Ashford said with deliberate calm, "because you seem incapable of understanding the very thing that drove her away." Adrian's glare sharpened. "And what would that be? That she needed something you refused to give?" The words struck him like physical blows. Ashford stepped closer, smirking faintly. "You marry a woman for duty. Keep her at a distance. Never offer warmth. Never show affection. And then you are surprised when she flees? Good. God, Ravensford, even I am not so blind." Adrian's breath trembled. Ashford's gaze turned pointed, almost clinical. "Tell me, did you ever once consider what she felt? Or were you too busy being your father's perfect heir?" The crack became a fracture. Adrian struck before he realized he had moved. He seized Ashford by the front of his coat and slammed him against the stone column. The force echoed through the gardens, startling a flock of birds into flight. "Do not speak of what you do not." "Understand," Adrian growled through clenched teeth. Ashford winced but did not look afraid, only intrigued. "Ah," he said quietly, "there it is. A glimpse of the man beneath the marble. If only Eleanor had seen this side of you sooner." Adrian shoved him harder. The rage, long suppressed, long denied, burned hot beneath his skin. "You know nothing of her," Adrian hissed. "I know enough," Ashford replied calmly. "Enough to see what you refuse to see." Adrian's grip faltered just slightly. Ashford leaned in, lowering his voice. "She did not leave you out of rebellion. She left because she believed you would never notice." Adrian released him abruptly, stepping back as if burned. Ashford straightened his coat, unbothered. "She disappeared because she thought she meant nothing to you. You made her invisible, Ravensford, and now you hunt her like a man who has just realized what he lost." Adrian felt something collapse inside him, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet devastation far more painful. Ashford softened just a fraction, not with kindness but with truth. "If I had been the man beside her, Ravensford, I would have seen her." Adrian's hands curled into fists, but there was no point in striking him again. The blow had already landed, in the form of a truth Adrian had avoided for months. He had failed her. He turned away, chest heaving, vision blurring with the force of emotions he could barely contain. His breath misted sharply in the air as he gripped the nearest bench to steady himself. "I never meant to hurt her," he whispered. Ashford studied him for a long moment. "Then ask yourself, Ravensford, why did you?" The question hung in the air like a sentence. Ashford walked away, his boots echoing faintly along the stone path, leaving Adrian alone with the ruin of his own pride. Adrian remained motionless, staring at the frost on the bench, trying to gather the pieces of himself. Why had he hurt her? He had never raised his voice, never spoken with cruelty, never pushed her aside physically, but he had never drawn her close either, and that perhaps was the deepest wound of all. He lifted a hand to his face, pressing his fingers against his brow as if he could force clarity from pain. But all he felt was the truth settling over him like the cold. He had committed the oldest mistake of all, believing silence was safety, believing distance was dignity, believing a woman as gentle as Eleanor would endure loneliness forever. A sudden rustling drew his attention. He turned sharply. A figure, a slight one, at the far end of the gallery. His heart lurched. "Eleanor!" The name slipped from him in a breathless whisper, but when he hurried forward, the figure vanished behind a column, and when he reached it, he found only shadows and emptiness. Frustration clawed at him. He was unraveling, losing both control and reason. Everything inside him trembled with a sense of failure so profound it stole his breath. He leaned against the cold glass, closing his eyes. "I am sorry," he whispered into the empty air. "Wherever you are, I am sorry." No answer came. The gardens offered only silence. The moment he stepped outside, snow began to fall, soft, relentless, uncaring. It coated his hair, his shoulders, the edges of his coat. He let it. For the first time in his life, he did not care how the world saw him. He had broken something precious, and now he feared it could not be mended. He mounted his horse with the heaviness of a man who finally understood the full cost of pride. The reins felt cold in his hands. The wind cut through his coat as though determined to expose every vulnerable part of him. He whispered one last truth into the night. "I drove her away." The admission was a wound, a confession, a fall, and the Earl of Ravensford, who had once believed himself incapable of losing control, rode into the storm, knowing that he had lost far more than control. He had lost her. London swallowed him for days, not with the grand, sweeping beauty society adored, but with its cold alleys, its unswept corners, its ceaseless fog that seeped into bone and memory alike. Adrian Hawthorne searched every district, from Westminster's polished stone to the narrow lanes near Holborn, moving with the haunted precision of a man who no longer cared about dignity or reputation. He questioned coachmen, questioned innkeepers, questioned anyone who might have glimpsed a woman in a lavender cloak. He slept scarcely at all, ate only, when exhaustion forced him to pause, lived with the relentless pulse of fear beating behind each breath. And still, Eleanor remained missing. London offered noise, frost, and indifference, but no trace of her. The city was too vast, too merciless, too easy for a gentle woman to disappear inside without leaving a ripple. After 5 sleepless nights, Adrian stood at the edge of the Thames, the winter wind slicing across the water like shards of ice. He had come here at dawn, after another fruitless search, hoping the empty riverbank might grant him clarity. Instead, it granted him only the cold truth of solitude. He stared at the water, remembering the last time he had seen Eleanor standing near a body of water. Ravensford's lake had sparkled behind her, turning her hair to pale fire. She had worn soft blue then, and her eyes had held something he had been too blind to recognize. Longing. "How could I have missed it?" he whispered to the wind. He pressed a hand to the railing, but the iron felt no colder than the guilt settling inside him. He had been raised to endure distance, to accept silence, to bury affection beneath layers of duty and restraint. That legacy had shaped him for so long that he had not realized it had become a prison. Worse, he had unknowingly forced Eleanor into it with him. She had been a gentle soul placed in the hands of a man who did not know gentleness. Now she was gone, and he understood, too late, that his silence had been the deepest wound he could inflict. He turned away from the river only when the sky began to brighten. The fog drifted low beneath the bridge, wrapping the city in its grey shroud. Adrian mounted his horse, prepared to continue the search, but when he reached the townhouse on the Strand, a carriage was waiting, and the man standing beside it froze him in place. Lord Whitcomb, Eleanor's father. His presence was unexpected, his face paler, sterner, more strained than Adrian had ever seen. The older man approached with stiff dignity, his gloved hands trembling only slightly. "Lord Ravensford," he said, voice tight, "I assume you know why I am here." Adrian dismounted slowly, bracing himself. "You know she is missing." "Missing?" Whitcomb repeated, eyes flashing with restrained fury. "My daughter did not simply vanish, my lord. She fled your home." Adrian's breath locked in his throat. Whitcomb's jaw tightened. "She has written to me." Adrian's heart twisted violently. "She contacted you?" Whitcomb withdrew a letter from his coat. The seal was broken. Adrian recognized the handwriting instantly. Eleanor's, delicate yet steady, though the lines looked strained, almost trembling. Whitcomb opened the letter and read aloud, voice shaking despite his attempt at control. "Father, I am safe. I ask that you do not seek me. I do not wish to bring shame upon you or the Whitcomb name. I have left Ravensford Manor of my own accord. I do not belong there, nor am I wanted. Please forgive me. Do not let him search. For me, Eleanor." The world seemed to tilt beneath Adrian's feet. "Nor am I wanted." He felt the words like a blow to the spine. Whitcomb lowered the letter and fixed him with a hard, condemning stare. "She believes you do not want her, Ravensford. She believes she was a burden. She believes, and I quote, a wife in name only." Adrian's breath turned ragged. "I never," he struggled to find the words, "I never meant to make her feel that." "But you did," Whitcomb snapped. "You married her for duty. You isolated her. You showed her nothing of affection or humanity. What did you expect she would feel?" Adrian stepped back, just once, as though struck. Whitcomb's voice softened slightly, but only slightly. "She wrote to me 10 days before she fled. A frightened letter, a lonely one. She said she feared she had become invisible within Ravensford Manor." Invisible. Adrian's chest constricted. He recalled her quiet steps, her soft voice, the way she had looked at him on the terrace, waiting, hoping for something he had never given. "I thought she preferred silence," Adrian whispered. Whitcomb exhaled long and heavily. "No woman prefers being unseen by her own husband." Adrian's hand gripped the railing of the townhouse steps, knuckles white. Whitcomb gave him a searching, pained look. "Do you know where she is, Ravensford?" "Truly?" Adrian shook his head slowly, ashamed. "No. Then I will not allow you to search for her." The statement shattered the air. Adrian's eyes snapped up. "You cannot forbid—" "I can," Whitcomb interrupted sharply. "And I do. She has expressed clearly that she does not wish to be found. My daughter's wishes matter more than your conscience, my lord." Adrian's control faltered for the first time in years. "I cannot stop searching." "You must," Whitcomb said. "If you truly care about her peace, you must." Adrian's breath trembled. "You think I do not care?" Whitcomb's expression softened, with something close to pity. "I once believed you capable of it, but now I fear you simply realized too late." Adrian closed his eyes, pain searing through him. Whitcomb continued, voice low. "Eleanor is fragile. You may not have seen it because she hid it well, but I did. Her courage was quiet, subtle, but she is not built to endure a loveless marriage." Adrian swallowed the taste of regret, sharp and bitter. "It was never loveless." Whitcomb paused, surprised by the depth of emotion in Adrian's tone. "Not for you." Adrian shook his head, unable to form the words. The older man exhaled, weary. "If that is true, then the tragedy is greater still." Silence fell between them, thick with unspoken truths. Finally, Whitcomb said, "Return to Ravensford. Give her distance. Give her time. If she wished your presence, she would not have disappeared." He turned to leave, but stopped after one step. "Eleanor wrote that she would contact me when she is ready," he said softly. "I will honor that. And if she wishes to return, it will be of her own choosing." Whitcomb entered his carriage and vanished down the fog-filled street. Adrian remained motionless, hand pressed against the railing as though he might collapse without its support. When he finally entered the townhouse, he felt the weight of an entire world pressing on his shoulders. He knew Whitcomb was wrong about one thing. Eleanor had not left because she did not want him. She left because she believed he did not want her, and that belief had been shaped by every moment he had remained silent when she needed his voice. He sat heavily in the dim parlor, elbows on his knees, head bowed. For the first time, there was no anger, no jealousy, no pride, only regret, pure, devastating regret. He remembered the first week of their marriage, when she had tried to speak to him about her favorite novels. He had nodded politely, but had not asked a single question back. He remembered her attempt to sit closer to him at supper, and how he had shifted away out of habit, not realizing how she stiffened in response. He remembered the early mornings when she walked the gardens alone, glancing back at the manor windows as though hoping he might join her. He never had. He had given her nothing. Nothing but distance. Nothing but coldness. Nothing but the polished indifference he had inherited like a curse. And when she asked, quietly, trembling, if she disappointed him, he had offered only vague reassurances and no warmth. He should have told her then. He should have told her he admired her gentleness. He should have told her she brought light to Ravensford. He should have told her that her presence steadied him in ways he did not understand. But men raised in silence do not know how to speak until the person who needed the words has already gone. He spent that night pacing the length of the parlor, unable to sit still. Outside, London's fog pressed against the windows like a reminder that he was buried in the consequences of his own choices. By dawn, he made the only decision he could. He would return to Ravensford, not because Whitcomb commanded it, not because Eleanor wished to distance herself, but because Adrian needed to face what he had broken, to understand himself before he could hope to be worthy of her again. He packed in silence, his movements slow, deliberate, heavy with a sorrow he barely contained. As he fastened his cloak, he felt the ache of defeat. But it was not true defeat. It was the first step toward the man he should have been all along. The journey back to Ravensford took 2 days. Snow fell steadily, blanketing the countryside in white silence. As the manor came into view, a sweeping, cold, magnificent structure, it looked less like home and more like a monument to his failures. He dismounted slowly, staring at the windows where Eleanor once stood, waiting for him to speak, waiting for him to see her. Inside, the halls echoed with emptiness. Her chamber door remained slightly ajar, exactly as he had left it. He stepped inside and felt something inside him finally shatter. Her absence filled the room more heavily than her presence ever had. He lowered himself onto the edge of her bed, pressing a hand to his eyes. There, in the dim quiet, the Earl of Ravensford, so proud, so controlled, so impossibly restrained, allowed the truth to break him. He loved her. He had loved her for longer than he realized, and he had driven her away with the very armor he thought protected him. When he finally rose, decision settled inside him with the weight of iron. He would not give up. He would not resign himself to loss. He would not allow fear, pride, or legacy to rob him of the woman who had taught him, through her absence, what love truly meant. He would change, for her, because of her. Because without her, Ravensford was nothing but stone and empty corridors. He stood at the window, watching snow fall over the frozen lake. Somewhere out there, Eleanor was breathing the same winter air, carrying wounds he had inflicted. He prayed she was safe. He prayed she was warm. He prayed she might one day allow him to explain. And as the first tear he had shed since childhood slipped silently down his cheek, he whispered into the cold room, "I will find you, even if it takes a lifetime." Winter at Ravensford grew harsher with every passing day. A heavy stillness settled over the manor, draping itself along the corridors like a mourning veil. The servants spoke in hushed tones, their footsteps soft, their eyes flicking nervously whenever the Earl passed by. Adrian Hawthorne had always been a man of few words, but now he was a man of almost none. Silence clung to him as tightly as his shadow, deepening the air around him with a weight that made even the bravest footman tread lightly. He spent hours walking the estate grounds, boots crunching through the frost, cloak pulled tight against the bitter wind, searching for something he could not name. Perhaps for the memory of Eleanor. Perhaps for the man he had been before losing her. Or perhaps for the courage to become someone she might one day forgive. But forgiveness felt impossibly distant. She had left him, and she had asked her father to forbid him from pursuing her. That truth cut deeper than he expected. It had been weeks, yet her letter still burned in his pocket, the creases softened by how many times he had unfolded it. He carried it everywhere, not out of self-punishment, though it served as that, but because it was the only piece of her left to him. I do not belong there, nor am I wanted. Those words had reshaped him. They had broken something that needed breaking. And now, with the storm raging outside and regret raging within, Adrian felt the first fragile stirrings of resolve. Not the cold, rigid resolve of his father, not the prideful resolve of the Earl of Ravensford, but something quieter, something humbler, something human. He would not reclaim her through force or expectation or entitlement. He would earn her forgiveness, earn her trust, earn whatever piece of her heart she might still possess. He would learn to speak the words he had always feared. He would learn to see her as she deserved to be seen. He would learn to become the man she needed, not the man he had been taught to be, but to do that, he needed to begin. It was nearly 3 weeks after returning to Ravensford when he received the first whisper of hope. A messenger arrived just before dusk, his horse tired, his cloak dusted with snow. He bowed low as Adrian descended the manor steps. "My lord," the messenger said, breath visible in the cold air, "I bring news from the village of Aldbury." Adrian's heartbeat quickened. "A woman in a lavender cloak was seen there," the messenger continued. "Traveling alone, speaking little but polite. She stayed at the local inn for 2 nights. Quiet, they said. Frightened." Adrian's breath caught. "When?" 11 days ago. 11 days. Too long. But a trail at last. "Do you know where she went?" Adrian asked. "They believe she headed toward Northbridge, my lord, on foot." Northbridge, a small town north of Ravensford Estate, remote, unremarkable, a place one might choose if they wished to disappear. Adrian closed his eyes, steadying the surge of emotion, fear, hope, dread, longing, before it could swallow him. He opened them with newfound resolve. "Prepare my horse," he said. "I leave within the hour." The servants moved quickly, almost relieved to see the Earl acting again, with purpose. He rode into the night, the wind fierce, the cold biting through his coat. Snowflakes lashed across his face, but he did not slow. He rode through forests, through quiet villages, through fields glistening under moonlight. His breath formed clouds in the freezing air, his hands stiffening against the reins, but he continued, because she might be ahead, because every mile brought him closer to her, because every beat of his heart whispered her name. He reached Aldbury just before. Tahan Dadas, the innkeeper, confirmed the story. Yes, a gentle young woman had stayed there, pale, quiet, sad. She rarely spoke, but always thanked the staff with a timid smile. She had inquired about work opportunities in smaller towns. She had left with a small bag and an unsteady voice. "She seemed lost, my lord," the innkeeper said softly, not in the way of someone seeking mischief, but of someone trying to disappear from pain. Adrian's chest tightened. He thanked the man, left payment far larger than necessary, and continued toward Northbridge. The journey took another day. When he arrived, weary and cold, he questioned everyone, the blacksmith, the grocer, the local seamstress. Most had seen nothing. Some thought they might have glimpsed her. One woman insisted a young lady had been at the churchyard during the early hours of prayer, but she had slipped away before anyone could speak to her. By the time the sky darkened, Adrian's hope flickered dangerously. He walked the quiet streets of Northbridge, passing closed shutters, snow-dusted doorsteps, and the dim lanterns glowing in the night. The town was peaceful, almost painfully so. Eleanor, gentle, terrified Eleanor, could have vanished easily into its stillness. He stepped into the church at the edge of the village, closing the heavy oak door behind him. The interior was dim, illuminated only by a few candles near the altar. The air held the faint scent of pine and old stone. Adrian walked slowly down the aisle, tugging off. His gloves, breath clouding in the silence. It was only when he reached the front pew that he saw it, a small folded scrap of fabric. Lavender. His heart stopped. He picked it up gently, afraid it might crumble. It was a torn piece of a cloak, hers. He recognized the embroidery at once. Eleanor's hands had stitched it herself, shortly after their wedding. He had noticed it once, in passing. He remembered thinking it delicate. Now, it was all he had. He held the scrap tightly, and for a moment, he could not breathe, could not think, could do nothing but feel the crushing weight of being one step behind her. Again, he bowed his head, not in prayer, but in surrender, or perhaps both. He did not know. He whispered into the silence, "Please, let her be safe." He left the church feeling older, colder, heavier. He spent 2 more days in Northbridge, searching every corner, questioning everyone again. But the trail seemed to fade into nothing. Eleanor had kept moving, always moving, always, just beyond the reach of his outstretched hand. He returned to Ravensford feeling hollow, but not defeated, not yet. If Eleanor wished to erase herself from his world, she had chosen the perfect method. Small towns, temporary lodgings, early departures, no carriage, no servants. Still, part of him believed she could not wander forever. Eventually she would stop somewhere. Eventually, he would find her. The manor felt colder now, its silence sharper. Each day without her carved deeper lines into his expression. The servants noticed but said nothing. They watched him move through the halls like a man haunted by ghosts only he could see. One evening, snow piled thick against the windows, Adrian sat at his desk, staring at the torn piece of lavender fabric. The fire cast a warm glow across the room, but he felt none of it. He placed the fabric beside the letter she had left him, 2 remnants of a life he had broken. He lowered his head into his hands. For the first time, he whispered the word he had avoided for weeks. "Please." He said it again, breath shaking. "Please come back." His voice cracked, quietly, but it cracked. He had loved her in silence, from a distance, without giving her the slightest hint she mattered. Now he loved her in absence, loved her with a desperation he had never expected to feel, loved her with a vulnerability his father would have mocked. But his father's voice no longer shaped him. Only her absence did. That night he wrote a letter, not elegant, not refined, raw. "Eleanor, I do not know where you are, but I know why you left. And I know it was my fault. You were not unwanted. You were not unseen. I failed you. I am trying to change. I only ask that you give me the chance to prove it. Please write to me. A single line, a single word. Let me know you are safe. Adrian." He sealed it, placed it on the edge of his desk, and knew she would never read it. He did not know where to send it. The next morning, exhaustion finally overcame him. He fell asleep in the study, head resting on the cooled surface of the desk. A knock woke him hours later. "My lord," came the butler's voice, hesitant. "A letter has arrived, addressed to you." Adrian shot to his feet so quickly the chair scraped sharply across the floor. "From whom?" he asked, voice unsteady. The butler swallowed. "From Lady Eleanor." Adrian's heart stopped. Completely. He reached for the letter with trembling hands. The envelope was worn from travel, edges, softened, bearing her handwriting, shakier than usual. Inside only a few lines. "My lord, do not search for me. I need time. Please honor this. I am safe." Adrian's breath left him in a rush. Relief and agony collided inside him, sharp and overwhelming. She was alive. She was safe. But she still did not want him near. He pressed the letter to his chest and made a decision. He would honor her wishes. He would not chase her through towns or shadows. He would not frighten her with his desperation. He would not repeat the mistakes of pride, but he would not stop trying to change. She asked for time. He would give her time. She wanted distance. He would respect distance. But when the moment came, when she was ready, he would return to her, not as the man who drove her away, but as the man she had deserved from the beginning. And so Adrian Hawthorne finally understood the hardest truth of all. Redemption does not begin by reaching for the woman you love. It begins by stepping back and becoming someone worthy of being reached. Winter loosened its grip on Ravensford slowly. The frost began to thin along the stone pathways. The lake, once a hardened sheet of ice, reflected faint ripples beneath the pale sun. But inside Adrian Hawthorne, the cold had not lifted. It lived in him as a reminder, a punishment he carried through each passing week without Eleanor. He kept his promise. He did not search for her, not through messengers, not through inquiries, not through the quiet desperation that pressed against his ribs with every sunrise. He spent his days repairing what he had long neglected, himself. He walked the estate with intention rather than duty, speaking to the tenants rather than merely observing them. He wrote letters to the villagers he had once ignored. He repaired portions of the manor he had allowed to fall into disuse. He even visited the chapel, though the last time he had prayed there, he had been a child at his mother's bedside. He improved. He changed. But each step forward reminded him how deeply he had failed Eleanor. And still, her letters came. Not frequently, never expressive. Each only a few lines. But they came. I am in a safe place. Do not worry. I am well. I still need time. Never more than that. Yet Adrian cherished each letter as though it were a lifeline. He read them late at night by candlelight, running his thumb over the familiar loops of her handwriting until exhaustion claimed him. Weeks passed, then months, until one evening, early spring, when the world smelled faintly of thawing earth, another letter arrived. A different one, a heavier envelope, pressed carefully, addressed in her quiet hand, with a place written on the back. Windmere Cottage, Northbridge. She had given him a location. His pulse surged like a storm. He opened the letter with trembling fingers. My lord, if you wish to speak, you may come, but I do not promise what you may hope for. E. He read it several times, unable to breathe. She was ready to see him, not ready to return, not ready to forgive, not ready to love, but ready to face him. After months of silence, distance, reflection, she was offering one fragile chance. Adrian closed his eyes, the weight of the moment settling through him like truth made flesh. He would not waste it. He left Ravensford at dawn, the world coated in morning mist. The journey to Northbridge felt longer than before, though he had traveled it many times in his relentless search. Now, the miles carried something else: anticipation, fear, hope, dread. He reached Windmere Cottage just before noon. It was small, humble, surrounded by budding lavender bushes and a white wooden fence that had chipped from the harsh winter. Smoke curled from the chimney. A cat slept curled on the windowsill. Everything about the cottage whispered gentleness, safety, solitude, everything Eleanor would choose. Adrian dismounted slowly. His breath trembled visibly in the cool air. He moved through the gate, like a man approaching an altar. He knocked once. Silence stretched. He nearly stepped back to give her time, to give himself time, when the door opened, and there she stood, Eleanor. She looked different, not in appearance, but in presence. Softer, yet stronger. Pale, yet steadier. Her hair was pulled loosely at her nape. She wore a simple ivory dress with a shawl over her shoulders. Her eyes, those soft violet eyes, moved to him cautiously, as though unsure whether to believe he was truly there. Adrian, she whispered, the name fragile on her tongue. It hit him harder than any blow he had ever endured. He removed his gloves with trembling hands. Eleanor. They stood facing one another, separated by a doorway, but bound by months of unspoken words. She stepped aside first, tentative, nervous, but inviting. You may come in. He entered slowly, feeling as though the world had narrowed to the small, quiet space between them. The cottage was warm, decorated with simple comforts. Few flowers in a vase, a knitted blanket on a chair, books stacked near the hearth. It struck him painfully how modest the place was compared to Ravensford Manor, yet it felt more like a home than any room he had walked through in months. You look well, he said softly, unsure of anything except that he was afraid to say too much. Eleanor clasped her hands lightly in front of her. And you look different, he swallowed. I am different. She nodded, barely, and motioned for him to sit. He did not. He remained standing, as though sitting might suggest he intended to stay without permission. Finally, Eleanor spoke. "Why did you come?" Her voice held no accusation, only sincerity and uncertainty. Adrian answered honestly, "Because you asked me to." A flicker crossed her eyes, something soft, fleeting, almost wounded. "And because I needed to," he added more quietly. Silence filled the room. He did not rush it. He let it breathe. Then, when she seemed steady enough to hear, he began. "I owe you more apologies than I can speak," he said. "And I know apologies may not be what you want." She looked down. "I do not know what I want." "I know," he whispered. "That is why I am here. To listen. To give you whatever time you need. To explain myself when asked. To say only what is true." She raised her eyes again, meeting his fully. "Then tell me this. Did you ever want me? Even once? Even a little?" The question cut through him. Not sharply, but deeply. He exhaled slowly, stepping closer but stopping midway between them. "I wanted you," he said. "More than I knew how to show. More than I allowed myself to feel, and more than I deserve to admit now." Her breath caught, quietly, but she did not look away. He continued. "But wanting you always frightened me. It still does, because the moment I began to, I realized how unprepared I was to love someone who could see through everything I pretend to be." Eleanor's shoulders tightened. "I did not want to see through you. I only wanted you to see me." His eyes softened with pain. "I know, and I failed you." She turned away then, walking slowly toward the window. Light framed her silhouette. Her voice was barely above a breath. "I was so lonely," she whispered. "Lonelier than I had ever been in my life. I ate alone. I walked alone. I slept alone. I felt as though Ravensford swallowed me whole." Adrian's throat tightened. "I know. I saw it far too late." She shook her head. "No, you didn't see. You noticed. Which is different. Noticing is passive. Seeing requires caring." He stepped toward her, slow, controlled, terrified of frightening her. "Eleanor, I cared. I cared more than I allowed myself to understand." A tear slipped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it. "I never wanted your title," she said, "or your wealth, or the respect people gave you. I wanted—" She trembled, unable to say it. Adrian finished for her, his voice breaking despite his attempt to hold it steady. "You wanted your husband." A quiet sob escaped her lips, soft and immediate, as though she had held it for too long. He closed the remaining distance, stopping just behind her, close enough to feel her trembling but not touching her. "I cannot change what I did," he murmured. "I cannot take away the silence that hurt you, or the distance you forced yourself to survive. But I can promise you this. If you allow me even a fragment of your trust, I will spend the rest of my life learning to love you the way you deserved from the beginning." She breathed unsteadily. "What if I cannot trust you? What if the hurt is too deep?" He bowed his head. "Then I will accept it. But I will not walk away unless you ask me to." She turned to face him then, eyes shimmering. "Why? Why now?" He answered without hesitation. "Because losing you showed me what my father's pride never allowed me to feel. Because your absence taught me what my mother tried to teach before she died. Because I realized, when you vanished into the world, that I do not know how to breathe in a world where you are not in it." Eleanor's lips parted slightly. Emotion crossed her face. Disbelief, fear, longing, confusion, all tangled together. "You speak differently now," she whispered. "I feel differently now." "And what do you feel?" He swallowed. "Everything I never let myself feel," he said. "Fear, regret, hope, and something I am still learning to name." She looked at him for a long, long moment. Then she asked the question he had, dreaded and prayed for. "If I returned, what would change?" Adrian stepped closer, not rushed, not desperate, certain. "Everything." Her breath hitched. He lifted a hand slowly, so slowly she could have stepped away, but she didn't. He brushed a tear from her cheek with the lightest touch. She closed her eyes, leaning ever so slightly into his hand. It was the smallest gesture, but it was everything. He lowered his voice, honest, raw, stripped of every mask he had ever worn. "Eleanor, I love you." The words landed between them like fragile glass, trembling but unbroken. She opened her eyes, tears glistening. "Say it again." He stepped closer, gently cupping her cheek this time, and whispered with the steadiness of a man who had finally learned the language his heart had been silenced from speaking. "I love you." Her tears fell freely now. She whispered back, voice breaking with months of pain and hope intertwined, "Then let me learn how to believe it." His chest trembled. "I will. Help you?" She nodded, small, hesitant, but real. "I cannot promise I am ready to return. I know. I cannot promise the hurt is gone. I know. And I cannot promise forgiveness will be simple. I expect nothing simple. But I am willing to try." Adrian closed his eyes, relief washing over him so deeply his knees nearly gave way. He leaned his forehead to hers, a small touch, barely there, but it felt like an entire world rebuilt. "Trying," he whispered, "is more than I deserve." She placed a hand on his chest, tentative, trembling, feeling the unsteady rhythm beneath. "You may sit," she whispered, "and stay for a while." He exhaled shakily and stayed, not as the Earl of Ravensford, not as the Man of Stone, but as a man finally stripped of pride and speaking for the first time from the place where love had been waiting all along.